everyone. I'm Brad Bough, Lawrence County Veterans Service Officer. And here we are again with the third episode of the Veterans History Project. So welcome, everyone. Unfortunately today, my good friend Lee Hutchinson, B-17 World War II veteran, could not be with us. However, we do have two very distinguished guests, both of them Vietnam veterans. Dave Edwards, the United States Navy. Welcome, Dave, and thank you for your service. And Wayne Umphress, United States Air Force veteran, Vietnam. Thank you for your service as well, Wayne. Both these gentlemen are retired military, Dave through the United States Army National Guard, and Wayne through the United States Air Force. Wayne, when did you go into the Air Force? What year?
Went in October 1962.
October of 62, wow. That was the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Actually,
going full bore.
I didn't know it at the time. I went in on October 15th, 1962, and the Cuban Missile Crisis was the next day. So I picked a heck of a time to go in, didn't I?
Yes, you did. Yeah. Dave, when did you join the Navy?
I left for basic July 7th, 1967.
67.
I joined May 25th, same day I graduated high school, but it didn't leave until July.
Wasn't going to let them draft you, were you?
Nope.
And the Air Force, as far as I know, the Air Force itself never has had a draft.
The Air Force what?
The Air Force never has drafted people. The Air Force, not the Army Air Corps, but the Air Force itself has never did a draft, as far as I know.
Me too. I don't know of it.
All right, Wayne, what job did you do while you were in the Air Force?
What jobs did I do?
Yes.
This may take a while. My first assignment was firefighter. I got stationed at Heron Air Force Base, Texas, out of basic training. And I spent my first 4 years in the Air Force in the fire department. Well, 3 years in the fire department, then 1 year I was air rescue in helicopters. Then I got out of the service for about 8 or 9 months. Went back in later. Went back in as a radar operator, radar operations. That took me a lot of places. You want to know where I was at?
Yeah, sure.
Well, when I went back in 1966, went to school down at Keesler Air Force Base for radar operations. And after I graduated from that, my first duty assignment in radar was Fallon Air Force Station, or Naval Air Station in Nevada. The Air Force had a little corner on the base there that we ran our operations from there. From there, I went to Clear Air Force Station in Alaska, did a 1-year tour there. Left there and went to Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, did a little over a year there. And from there, I went to Korea. Went to a little radar site on a mountain over in Korea. Yongmuncheon was the name of it. And I got pulled out of there on a 12-hour notice, me and another guy. They pulled us out and sent us on our way. Didn't tell us where we was going or anything. Ended up, we went to Udon, Thailand, is where we ended up at, went through Vietnam and into Thailand. From there, I went to Slidell Radar Station in Slidell, Louisiana. From there, I went back to Clear Air Force Station, Alaska, and did another year there. When I left there, I went to Malmstrom Air Force Base, Great Falls, Montana. Did about a little 3 years there. Met my wife in Montana. Where did I go after that? Let me think a sec. Went to Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida. And did about a maybe 2-year tour there. Then I went to, where did I go next? Went to Malmstrom Air Force Base. From Malmstrom, my last duty station was Tinker Air Force Base. I was in the AWACS program.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma City, yeah. In AWACS. Then I retired from there.
Yeah, being the Veteran Service Officer, I have the privilege to talk to a lot of our local veterans. Dave Edwards is one of them. And Dave has a funny story about when he was a young seaman on board. Was it the USS Hancock? Is that right?
Yeah.
Tell them about your first order from your section chief to make the coffee for the section?
Well, when I first went on board the ship, it was an aircraft carrier, and it was sitting in dry docks, all rusty where they was working on it. And a first class petty officer told me to go make coffee. We had a 55-cup coffee pot. Well, nobody told me that there was a difference in water lines, and so they didn't like that coffee made out of salt water. They never did ask me to make coffee again, though. But it was coming from a little town, and you see an 898-foot ship setting out of the water. It's kind of scary at 3 o'clock in the morning when we first got there. And
Yeah, that's approximately the same size as 3 football fields.
yeah,
900 feet would be 3 football fields, and what you said is 898 feet. So
Yeah.
there you go.
it was,
That would be something for a guy from Mitchell, Indiana, wouldn't it?
yeah, it was shocking. I've met a couple of guys that got out of a boot camp the day before I did, and we was all going on the same ship. We met on the airplane going out. So we run around San Francisco for 2 or 3 days before we reported. We were supposed to report to Alameda. Well, the ship was sitting across the bay in dry dock. So we had to take a small boat all the way across, and that water in the bay's choppy. And like I said, it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when we reported. I was ready to come home. But I spent my whole time on board that ship, and it got to be home before long. And when I was in, there were 3 types of gunner's mates in the Navy at that time. You had a GMG, which is gunner's mate guns, GMM, gunner's mate missiles, and I was a gunner's mate technician. I worked on stored and serviced special weapons, as we called them. And my first trip over to the Tonkin Gulf, that's all we'd done. But since we all had top secret security clearances, we got drafted to convert 500 and 1,000-pound bombs into mines. The plane would drop them and they wouldn't explode. And one piece of metal, like a boot eyelet, they'd magnetize, and just one little piece of metal and it'd blow. We dropped a lot of them in the rivers over there. And we done that our Westpac tours were 9 months each. And from there, we'd go into Japan or the Philippines and resupply. Plus, we had a supply ship about every other day bringing goods and ammo on board.
Mail from home.
Yeah, well, we had a plane that done that.
Did you?
I got to ride in that plane once and land on board ship. And you look down out of that plane, see that little bitty ship floating around down there.
I had an opportunity to do that. I declined also.
Yeah, that ship looks small when you're high up in the air, and we averaged, in 9 months, we'd average around 50,000 launches. So we stayed busy. We worked in my division when we was making converting the bombs into mines, 12 hours on, 12 hours off. There was 2 shifts of us. And that was usually, sometimes we'd have time for meals, sometimes we wouldn't, just depending on flight ops. But I'm glad I served in the Navy. I knew when I was 7, 8 years old, I used to watch Victory at Sea. So I knew I was going to the Navy. That's the only thing that ever entered my mind. But it was an experience. We got to travel a lot. In a 3-year period, I got to cross the equator twice. And we ended up going to Sydney. Then once we went to Singapore, and the equator is just about 100 miles south of Singapore, so we made a big loop so we could cross it again. That ceremony was a lot of fun.
So you are a shellback.
Yes. Yeah, the first time when you get initiated, if you take it in the right concept, it's funny. I'm still laughing about it 50-some years later. But now the second time, we had, with air crew on there, we had like 3,200 people. And when we crossed the second time, there was only like 150, 200 of us shellbacks. So we had to do a lot of work to initiate all the others. It was more fun the first time.
How much time did you spend off the coast of Vietnam, and how close did you get to Vietnam?
Well, like I said, we'd go over for 9 months at a time, and we'd go anywhere from 30 to 45 days in the Gulf. And then we'd go into the Philippines or Japan for anywhere from 3 to 5 days. So we'd get a little break and get some liberty.
And where did you get your liberty at, Dave?
Well, see, Yokosuka, Japan, and Olongapo, Philippines, and of course, then you get in Sydney. Been to Hong Kong 3 times. We usually went there around Christmas.
Yeah, back at that time, Hong Kong was a British protectorate, right?
I think it changed in '99, I think.
Yeah, it was in the late 90s, for sure.
it?
Yeah.
I never was one for big cities. And another thing, when we'd be in port, special services would set up a bunch of tours. You could take tours and everything. And they showed us one hillside there in Hong Kong. Had 1 million people living on that hill with just a piece of plywood or a cardboard box. I mean, it looked like a bomb hit it when you got to see it. But I enjoyed it. And Bob Hope and Ann Margaret and a bunch of them, every Christmas they'd put a show on board.
Yeah, I got to see them. I was front row.
I wasn't too far back from Ann Margaret. She was always one of my favorite actresses.
And Margaret,
Yeah.
I seen her on stage in Reno, Nevada.
Yeah, she really enjoyed entertaining the Vietnam veterans and stuff. She took a lot of pride in her work, and then we had different bands come out there every now and then. They'd lower the flight deck down so far and use it as a stage.
Now,
But most of the time we was just floating in water. I don't know how far out we was. We'd get close sometimes. And this one time there was 3 carriers there. And a Russian trawler, which is a spy boat. And then the Russians had a spy plane. It was like a big B-52 bomber.
it's the Bear 95, Tu-95.
And it flew over while we was
Yes.
all there. And of course, we always had a destroyer following us. And sharks. Because throw that trash off the fantail, they just follow the ships and eat what they could eat.
Well, the question came up the last show about how was the Navy exposed to the Agent Orange. Now, as I understand it, carriers in particular, other ships too for that matter, would take the water in out of the sea and desalinate it put purification chemicals in it, but it never took the herbicide out of the water.
Yeah, we done that a lot. I mean, I'm wanting to say it took 100,000 gallons of water to launch a plane. So,
And your ship was the first ship with steam catapults. Is
Yep.
that correct? The Hancock?
yep, before that, they just launched prop jobs off. And they added the angle deck. And earlier in the 60s, they actually shot a missile off of it. It was a World War II class carrier, and in the Battle of Lady Gulf during World War II, it got kamikazed. Then it went into mothballs. They towed it back to the States, and it went in mothballs. Then when Vietnam ramped up, they brought them out. And if you go look at the hull of the ship down below, it'll say USS Ticonderoga on it. But the John Hancock Insurance, during World War II, insurance company, said if they named the ship, the first ship done after them, they'd pay for it. So that's how the Ticonderoga become the Hancock.
Well, that's an interesting history note I didn't know. So that's very interesting.
Yeah,
Also, when the Navy aircraft would fly on missions, they would pretty much follow each other into the bombing area, and the first aircraft dropped its ordnance, kicked up a lot of dust, and then those other aircrafts flew right through it. And you guys had to keep those aircraft clean at all time, didn't you?
yeah. And our mail plane was just a little too proper. And they come over to one AMC looking for blood donation. A guy walked off the island and right into the prop of the plane. He didn't survive. Then we've lost a few overboard where they'd fall in.
Yeah, I know in Afghanistan, it was a couple times they would come in the chow hall and be asking who had a specific blood type after people were injured or wounded.
Yeah,
So Wayne, what are some of the kind of aircraft you worked around?
Well, Parent Air Force Base, Texas, so we had what they call ramp patrol. We had to have a fire truck on the flight line all the time in case a fire broke out. We had F-102s there. That's also where I got into helicopters. Had HH-43B rescue helicopter. I was in that for a year.
So you were with the pararescue people for a little while then.
Yeah, for a year. Yeah, that's what I was doing when I got out the first time. I kind of wish I'd stayed, but it worked out all right.
So what other kind of aircraft did you work with in the Air Force? You said the helicopters and the 102s.
Well, by working with them, I'm not sure what you mean. In radar operations, we launched them when I was in Udon, Thailand. We'd launch like maybe 300 to 400 sorties a day, the shift actually.
Were the B-52s there, or
No.
were they at another base in
These were
Thailand?
F-4s mostly over there.
F-4s.
Yeah. They had some F-111s there for a while. I think that's about all they had there really at the time. And when I was in aircraft, I was in AWACS there in Oklahoma. Had one interesting event happen. We was scheduled to fly to Langley Air Force Base, Virginia for just a routine mission. We got down there and they put us on alert.
Did you ever work as a fireman when you were in Thailand, or just strictly in the radar units?
Strictly radar.
Radar. So I know the aircraft crew chiefs would have to go out there at the end of the runway in case anything happened, because it was that important to get every aircraft launched for its mission to support the troops in Vietnam.
We stuck pretty close to the base. We didn't get much time. We worked 24 hours, straight, 2 shifts. But forget where I was going with that. I've had that problem a lot here lately. But
Well, did you have to do any repair on the radar units?
no kind of maintenance or anything. But to continue that story, in Langley there, they put us out on patrol. We got intel that the Russians are going to take a B-52 out of Cuba and overfly the brand new aircraft carrier, USS, I can't think of the name of it now, but the Russians came up to take pictures of it. I happened to be on the radio at the time, and scrambled the two F-4s out of Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, to go up and intercept them. Usually when you do that, it's like an airliner is off his flight line or where he's supposed to be. They'll scramble and they're fighter to go up and look at it. Usually it's just a passenger plane. But that one out there was actually, we chased him all the way back to Cuba.
A Bear bomber? The Russian Bear bomber?
It was, yeah, Bear, yeah.
And what we're talking about, the Russian Tu-95 Bear bomber, they still use those aircraft even today.
B-52s, yeah.
Well, we do. The United States Air Force, we still use the B-52s, but the Tu-95s are still using the Tu-95s as well. So, Dave, what type of aircraft were coming up off of your carriers?
Well, we had A4s and F8s. We had, I believe, 100 planes assigned to us, but we only had about 75 on board.
Now, the letter designations for the carriers, CVA indicates that it's a conventional, correct? Mm-hmm. Now, what letters would you see if it was a nuclear carrier? Is it CVN?
Wow, don't really remember now. Okay. I never had the opportunity to get on one.
Yeah, like the Nimitz is, I think it's CVN 68 maybe. It's 68 for sure is the number on it.
They've changed all that since I was in.
Yes, they're naming carriers after presidents now. They've got them lined up going forward. The new carriers will be named after presidents in sequential order, as I understand it.
When I was in Thailand, we had an incident happen over there. We had to man the radar 24 hours, and so we couldn't go to chow hall to eat or anything. We had to go get the in-flight box lunches and take them over and eat them on the position. And usually I sent one of the younger guys over to do that. It's like a mile to the in-flight kitchen, then go and pick up the box and bring them back. But that one night it was just a nice, quiet evening, kind of a little breezy outside. I decided I'm going to go get the box lunches. So I went and got the box lunches, took them back, set them on the work table there. In my command post, telephone went off, just a flashing light. And they called to tell me that we was, what was it? Red alert, I think is what it was called. So I told my supervisor, red alert. He said, what's going on? I said, I'll find out. I called the command post back, and there was a firefight on the flight line.
Yeah, you're under attack.
We were under attack, and there was seven Viet Cong got on base. But I didn't know until the next morning when we found out what happened. They got on base through what we call checkpoint Charlie, and I had to go through checkpoint Charlie to go get those flight line boxes. And the guard checked me and everything. And I come back, he checked me again, which is what he's supposed to do. Set those boxes down, and during that 1 mile drive, they got on base, and that's when the firefight. But the part that kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies, they killed that guard on checkpoint Charlie. After I went through it, I think, I can't prove it, but I think, because it was so late at night, I was probably the last person that seen that guard alive. I got a feeling they were just in the bushes waiting for me to go by.
Of course, because they don't know how many troops you have in that vehicle with you.
I didn't have any. It was a little
But
pickup
they didn't
truck.
know that.
I had a little pickup. I didn't have any armament or anything. Just a little pickup truck.
So yeah, they probably did wait for you to go. And what Wayne's talking about is checkpoints. In the Air Force, you give a alpha indication for checkpoints. So checkpoint A would be checkpoint alpha, checkpoint B, checkpoint Bravo, and so on down the phonetic alphabet. So anyway, you were just about that close to winding up in the middle of that firefight. Were you armed up at that time?
No, but I was about an hour later.
It's going to say that in the Air Force, you see a lot of people, not just your military law enforcement, which is called security forces in the Air Force now. In my time, it was security police. But not only security police carry firearms, but even your alert pilots, you'll see them with a shoulder holster pistol. So a lot of people in the Air Force are walking around that base with firearms. It's nothing unusual to see that.
We got a hold of our commander that night and told him what was going on. He said, get everybody that's got their weapons card, send them over to the armory. Everybody's supposed to have a weapons card. And it was like 4 of us that had our weapons cards. So I ended up with an M16 guarding the back fence because they thought we might be the target because they targeted that radar site one other time. But
Well, it's the radar. If you take out the radar site, you've pretty much just poked the eyes out of the Air Force being able to detect incoming enemy aircraft if you do knock out that radar. Is that correct, basically?
yeah, I ended up with an M16 rifle laying out there. It rained all night that night. I laid out there and got soaked. And got sun up, the Marine Corps lieutenant who was kind of took charge of our unit there and put us where we should have been. He came out and threw me a little jacket thing. Said, "Here you go, son. Stay dry." I'd been laying in the rain all night. But
At least it's a warm rain over there.
they ended up, they killed 6 of those insurgents and wounded the other one. And they gave me kind of the heebie-jeebies thinking about, they was probably right there when I went through that checkpoint,
And we always had good cooperation from the other branches of the military, was my experience with the Air Force. So not only just Air Force, you had the Marine Corps there by what you're saying. I'm sure you probably had some Army troops nearby too. Dave, how many times did you have to paint that ship and so on when you were in it? Because you always hear about the rust on board the Navy ships, or was that somebody else that did all that?
When I first went on board, I was in a different unit. I was hanging 40 feet off a gun mount above the water, chipping paint in December. And it gets breezy in San Francisco in the wintertime. But yeah, we painted all the time.
Did you have to use a needle gun? I heard Navy veterans talk about that it just chips the paint right off of it.
And you prime it with red lead, and you put that on there so thick that it really chips off. But that was, let's see, I was in that division for 4 or 5 months. Then I transferred to another one, and they didn't have any spaces on the outside of the ship to take care of, but we had magazines and stuff. We painted them before we went overseas every time.
Did you have any Marine Corps pilots on board the aircraft carrier with you?
Yeah. Also had Air Force pilots.
I know we did have some pilots that cross-trained to do carrier operations.
Yeah, I think we had 2 of them. And
Who was your captain on board the Hancock? Do you remember?
well, they changed every year. I can't remember their name. I've got them in my books at home.
Okay. Yeah, well, they do
Paul
rotate.
it was John Paul Jones.
I don't think he's quite that old, but
Now at one time we had, just in rank alone, we had between the Air Force pilots and the Marine Corps pilots, we had 6 or 7 officers on there that had the rank of captain. Of course, Navy captain being the same as a full bird colonel. And matter of fact, our executive officer on the last time we went over was a captain also.
Well, it's not unusual for any military branch to rotate command on an annual basis to get more officers with command time under their belt.
And we had an admiral. He wasn't on there all the time, but then when General Westmoreland took over the Army over there, they had to change a command ceremony on board our ship. We had to do the sideboard thing and had all kind of rank on there that day.
Did they pipe him on?
Yeah.
And the Navy, that's one of their traditions. When a senior officer comes on, they pipe them aboard.
Yeah, they'd always announce Admiral so-and-so arriving, and then when he'd fly off, they'd say Admiral so-and-so departing, but we had all kind of stars that day on shoulders.
During the Gulf War, we had President Bush 43 land on board an aircraft carrier. First time any Navy aircraft had carried the moniker of Navy One, just like Air Force One, or Army One, or Marine Corps One. Any military aircraft that the President of the United States is on automatically becomes one, whether it's Air Force, Army, Navy, or Marines.
And then towards the end, after they'd captured the Pueblo,
That was off the coast of Korea, wasn't it?
yeah, they sent us over there as a show of force.
I was on that Navy base out of Fowler, Nevada when that happened. I picked up a hitchhiker, Navy guy. I was hitchhiking back to the base that one night, and I made the mistake of asking him. I said, "You guys get your boat back yet?" He took a little offense to that being called a boat. That was a ship.
I think the only thing they like to be called boats is submarines.
Yeah, maybe.
Is that right, Dave?
Yes, that and they call the smaller.
Well, you got your ferry boats that take troops back and forth
Yeah,
from shore
they're
to
called
the...
gigs, but other than that, you're right. Submarine's the only one that gets called a boat.
At the assignments, I told you I had 3 different tours to Alaska, to Clear Air Force Station. Clear is one of 3 type BMUS bases in the world. One of them is Clear, Alaska, Follingsdale, Moore, England, and Thule, Greenland. There's only 3 in the world, and that radar, each screen, there's 3 of them. Each one of those is bigger than a football field. I re-enlisted almost got in trouble for that too, but I climbed that thing and the colonel went up with me and re-enlisted me. We didn't use any safety belts or anything.
Well, you can't get in trouble if you got a colonel with you.
He was a lieutenant colonel when I think he was starting to wonder if he was going to remain a lieutenant colonel. They sent pictures of us when I was taking the oath, and they wanted to put him in the Air Force Times, and I guess the correspondence he got back said, "You're lucky we're not putting you in jail because you didn't use any safety equipment." But it worked out all right.
They didn't even have us wearing earplugs when I was in the early 80s. There's your target, here's your rifle, you qualified. Now you're in deep trouble if you don't have earplugs and earmuffs on when you qualify. Times change, things change. You mentioned Keesler Air Force Base, and that's in Biloxi, Mississippi. That was one of the choice assignments when I was in the Air Force. Everybody wanted to go to the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. It's a beautiful area. I can't blame them for wanting to go there, but when you mentioned Keesler, I thought you're a lucky guy. Not a lot of people get that assignment. They want it, but they don't get it.
Now, Radar School is located on Keesler, and like the BMUs, the clear side, you had to go there for training for that.
Sure,
also.
Air Training Command Base. Yeah.
Now, those radars would pick up an object 3,000 miles out, the size of a beach ball, and track it. Every piece of anything that's flying around under coverage has got a number on it. If the satellite breaks up into 20 pieces, then you got 20 more numbers. And they've changed it a little bit, but we used to have to sit there and had what they call a sap sort. You had to watch that screen, and you knew there was one supposed to be coming through, and I mean, within 1 or 2 seconds, it picked it up, you know, then it tracked it. Interesting assignment.
The AWACS planes did a lot of stuff like that too.
Yeah,
didn't
they're mothballing those already. I kind of hurt my feelings. I flew in all of them there stateside. They're putting them in mothballs, getting a replacement for them, I guess. But
Well, I hope they have a replacement for them. And what we're talking about, folks, is the AWACS flies above, and it has a radar dome that rotates on top
Like a
of the
big
aircraft.
Frisbee.
Beg pardon?
it's like a big Frisbee.
Yes, it does. It looks like a big Frisbee. It rotates on top, and it's flying at such an altitude that it can spot anything that's flying down underneath, trying to sneak in onto our troops. Scud missiles in Iraq, another example of what the AWACS could pick up as it was coming in toward our troops. We give our Patriot missiles a chance to knock it out.
Drug runners.
Drug runners, there's another good one, yes.
I don't think, it wasn't public. When I was in AWACS, we had the drug enforcement people fly on board with us. And you know, they got intel, you know, somebody's gonna be coming, so. Then we'd fly them down there and they'd do their thing, I guess, call in the positions and everything, but I think at the time, that wasn't supposed to be happening yet.
That kind of reminds me, that's another branch of the military I need to look at getting onto the Coast Guard. Those guys did a lot of drug interdiction. I do know one Coast Guard veteran that served in Vietnam. So maybe I can talk to him, get him on here.
Did you see anything lately on the Air Force is going back to warrant officers?
Yes, I did see
that.
that the Air Force was going to have warrant officers again. That doesn't surprise me, because with the integration of the military, you had senior NCOs like yourself that had all that training in technical skills, but yet you've got 15, 16 years in as a senior NCO, but you're working for an Army warrant officer in an integrated military that only has 3 or 4 years in. So yes, we needed to do that as a branch of service. And we probably, just an opinion, the Air Force needs to go back to the sergeants rather than have somebody jump from a senior airman to a staff sergeant.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with those lower ranks. But
And with the integrated military, an Army corporal with 1 day time in grade as a corporal technically outranks a senior airman with 2 years time in grade. It's just the NCO versus the non-NCO.
we went TDY to, when I was in AWACS, we went TDY to Marine Corps base in Yuma, Arizona. We did, I think we was out there about 4 days. What was I going to do? I had a reason for bringing that up. Now I forgot what it was.
Marine Corps is a long way away from the ocean out there in Arizona.
That's the first time I seen them. I went over to pick the guys up. I didn't fly that one day. I went over to pick them up after they landed. And they had one of those Marine Corps, I don't know what the nomenclature is, but it come flying in and it kept slowing down. And I'm looking at that thing, it's slower and slower. And I said, if he don't speed up a little bit, he's going to fall out of the sky. And he stopped, landed, looked all directions, taxied. It's the first time I'd ever seen one of those.
Oh, the Harrier,
Yeah.
the jump jets, sure. Vertical takeoff and landing aircraft.
Yeah, I thought the guy was going to fall out of the sky.
Well, normally they would. If you don't have that lift on the wings, you're going to have an aerodynamic stall and fall straight down like a rock. Dave, did you have any Harriers on board those carriers when you were in, or was that after your time?
After.
After, because I know they did have Harriers on board the aircraft carriers. Most of them were flown by the Marines,
Yeah.
like Wayne was saying.
We just had the F-8s and A-4s and one, it was a larger airplane that they flew supplies and troops in, you know, sailors in. I think it was an A-2, and we had an AWACS.
We did joint missions when I was in AWACS with the Navy. I think they're, what was their nomenclature?
But now before they put those catapults in, they had spuds, prop jobs that they launched off because, but with our steam catapults, you went from 0 to 200 miles an hour and
Quickly.
real quick.
We had all the water you needed right there underneath the carrier, so you just suck it right in. And that's another thing too, though, when you think about it, that steam come up under those catapults after they were launched, and you guys were sucking that stuff right in,
Yeah,
just inhaling it.
yeah, we.
Every military chow hall I've ever been in, you can count on three things to be there to drink. You may not have soda pop like you do here in the States, but you can count on there's going to be coffee, iced tea, and lemonade. Never saw a military chow hall that didn't have those three things. And what do they have in common? Water. So even though you weren't directly sprayed with the Agent Orange, you still took it down with the water. And you showered with salt water in the Navy sometimes, didn't you? When they didn't have enough fresh water, they just piped this.
Well, they'd put you on, you could only turn the water on, get wet, turn it off. And they'd have a master at arms up there in the shower areas timing you.
And Master of Arms, that's like Navy MP, similar.
Matter of fact, Master Arm Rate did take over the shore patrol. But they're just on-ship police, more or less.
And they run the brig if somebody has to be.
Marine Corps run the brig.
Oh, did they? Okay.
We had
Yeah.
an incident when I was in AWACS. We had a joint mission with the Navy like a month before all this, and the Air Force invited the captain that was in charge of that incident to go flying with us. So he took us up on it. I got on the radio and told the radio woman to inform the pilot that we have a captain so-and-so, Navy captain, I can't remember his name. He said, okay. So on final approach, I can't remember what base we was flying into either, but on final approach, the captain asked me to check with the pilot, make sure he had a staff car waiting on him when we landed. The pilot didn't know that the Navy captain was an 06, but he found out.
When he hears a captain, he's just thinking 03 like a normal Air Force captain or Marine Corps captain for that matter.
Well, I told the pilot, I said, Captain so-and-so wants to make sure he's got a staff car. He said, I don't get a staff car. Why should I let a captain get a staff car? And I said, okay, you know. Then somebody informed the pilot that the captain was an 06, and he went through the ceiling. He said, do you mean to tell me I've been on like an 8-hour flight with a Navy captain and VIP and nobody told me about it? And I said, I told you twice, you know. But I didn't tell him it was 06. But.
Well, gentlemen, do either of you have anything else you want to discuss here today?
Yeah.
No. I
I'm
can't
like
think of
Gary.
anything.
I'm glad I'm not sorry at all that I went in service and made it a career. I don't know if I do it again, but
I enjoyed it. Like I said, since I was 6, 7 years old, I knew I was going to be a sailor.
biggest thing that impacted me, I guess, I moved 13 times in 20 years.
Wow. But at least the Air Force pays for your move.
Yeah.
That goes with any branch of the
Most of
military.
my assignments, I think, were west of the Mississippi, of course, Perrin, Texas, Nevada, Montana, Louisiana. Yeah, most of them was Florida. I did 2 missions in Florida, 2 tours. They weren't too bad.
I think they reinstated space age travel again now.
Yes, they have.
I never have taken advantage of that. I don't know why, but I might still one of these days. But
Well, either one of you could use that space age travel as retired military members.
I didn't know that.
Yes. It's there for retired military people as well. And you're on the bottom of the list as retired military.
Be the first one to bump off.
Yes. But if it's a big enough aircraft, you don't have to worry about that. Like KC-135 as an example, there's not going to be enough people on there, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, the accommodations aren't that great, but
I never did fly in one of those, but that's probably kind of crowded, isn't it? Back where the boom operator is.
it is crowded back where the boom operator is because it's where the tail comes to the point. But all up around and through there, above where the fuel is stored, big area. And it's the ones that I remember, maybe things have changed now, but the ones that I remember was basically cargo netting seats along the side of the aircraft. Well, you know how long those aircraft are. You can put a lot of people on those cargo nets, just little seat belts on the cargo nets, and it's where you're at. Like I said, it's not the best accommodations, but it's free. Well, do either of you have anything more to add?
Probably, but I won't remember until I get home, probably.
Yeah, that's what it is to me. I'll probably think of it.
I want to thank you guys for coming, and on behalf of the
Glad to
Lawrence
be
County
here.
Museum and Historical Society, I want to thank you for your service and for contributing to the Veterans History Project. And for those of you at home, you can't see Joe, but I want to thank Joe Voris for his time and efforts to put this program together. If you know Lee Hutchinson, tell him you missed him on this program.
I'll probably have dinner with him tomorrow night.
I hope so. Lee's going to be celebrating his 100th birthday here in June. So, for the Lawrence County Museum and Historical Society, I'm Brad Bough, Vice President. I want to thank you folks for tuning in and remind you, if you love your freedom, be sure to thank a veteran. So long, everyone.